What are the elements that make up a great school? The rarest element, of course, is results. In Yuma County, Arizona, the average school has about 57% of their students performing at proficient or above. In Arizona as a whole, it's about 65%. But here in Yuma, there's a school doing things a little bit differently, and their results speak for themselves.
Yuma's educational challenges were not a lot different than the entire state or many states in the United States. Students all across the country have been losing motivation to learn. What we became frustrated with is that the system of education that we had really was more system-centric than it was student-centric.
So what happens if you flip that model around? What happens if you design a school from the ground up around the student instead of the bureaucracy?
Our students need a new approach to education. Carpe Diem has that new approach. As you enter Carpe Diem, one of the first things you'll notice is that it doesn't look like other schools.
It's completely different than a normal school.
I would have to say it's very advanced.
The Carpe Diem was very different, but in a good way.
Carpe Diem Collegiate High School is a blended learning school that blends the best of face-to-face instruction, technology, and extended learning opportunities in order to boost student achievement. Kids today are wired in every way. They have their cell phones, their iPods, their iPad, and unfortunately, when they leave school, they power up. When they come back, they power down. So what we wanted to do was leverage that experience, that knowledge, that savviness about technology, and bring it into the classroom to where they would also be excited about using their skills to learn the things that we thought were important for them to learn.
Differences at Carpe Diem are both dramatic and subtle, but everything, from the way they interact with teachers to the way they take attendance, has been designed with the goal of making education a more positive, enriching, and empowering experience for students. At the heart of Carpe Diem is the Learning Center, where students perform most of their work following an individualized online curriculum.
Inside the Learning Center are 300 cubicles that every student is assigned to throughout the entire year.
When they come in, they see a building that's setting them up with high expectations to work. All that leads them to a more professional idea of what education is like in their heads.
Students divide their day between independent work at their computer and hands-on workshops with teachers.
I love working on a computer.
I love computers and I work with them as much as I can, so, it's great.
That computer actually can adapt and prescribes deeper level learning, more enriched learning, as well as more rigor as they move forward. But once they have the concept down from the computer, then they transition into what we call a workshop or a classroom, in which a teacher takes that concept and makes it more relevant by giving them projects, learning activities that help them to understand it in unique ways.
So you get on the computer and you do your work, but then also at the same time you can go to workshops and classes to get extra help.
And classroom time isn't about lectures. It's about interaction and discussion with students in order to provide them with context and critical thinking skills.
I think here we have better teacher-student relationships. The model itself allows for students to use the computer as well as the teacher-student interaction to get the best out of their educational experience.
Teachers then get to do the exciting part of it, and that is make it applicable and relevant to their lives. Nobody learns the same subject area at the same pace or the same abilities. Well, at Carpe Diem, we can customize the course. We can start them anywhere they happen to be and move them along at their pace. We believe that relationships are extremely important here. And so we try to desystematize everything to where we can focus on the kids, find out what do they need, and if they need it, we try to provide it right here.
Here, the teachers know where you're at exactly, so if you have a problem, they'll talk to you about it and they help you with it.
Assessment occurs literally every day, and it's all being aggregated, if you would, into the computer system. The teachers go through the data on a daily basis to see what needs to be changed or modified, who needs additional assistance. And once those students are identified, they can literally go in, talk to the student, find out what the concept was that they had a problem with, and then do some immediate intervention. And maybe it's just a very quick thing that happens, maybe 2 minutes, but the student gets the help they need.
For teachers, the Carpe Diem model means they're able to spend more one-on-one time with individual students. And over the course of a student's education at Carpe Diem, they'll interact with the same teacher for each core concept area every year, which means greater continuity and stronger relationships.
My math teacher, it's been my same math teacher since 6th grade. And over that time, he's learned my disadvantages or advantages. So he knows what I have trouble with or what I don't. So over the years, he's helped me with problems that I've had.
I think that is the most beautiful part about my job, because I get to see every one of them, and I get to see the growth. I actually can measure how I'm the one that's giving them that information in 6th grade that they must have in 7th, 8th to build upon to go to high school.
I think when they come in and they see we have high expectations as teachers, they want to excel for us. And when we have these special relationships, they want to work really hard to get the right answers and to do as well as they possibly could.
The teachers get to know the context of the students' lives, get to know their interests, get to know the goals, the careers, their aspirations. Because of that, everything that the teacher does can be related to that student.
If I had to describe the school to someone who never went here and never knew about it, I would describe it as a family. I went through like a rough patch last year, and they didn't just like look at me bad. They actually pulled me in. They're like, "What's wrong here?" And I told them what was wrong, and they're like, "We're gonna fix this." And I just got my act together. I felt like I had responsibility and like I have something to look forward to.
Carpe Diem's mission statement is to educate with knowledge, to empower with character, and to equip for life. One of the things we want to do is to make sure our students are ready with the knowledge they need for the life they're going to live, that they're empowered with the character they need as well as the skills necessary to be successful in the 21st century.
As a school, Carpe Diem probably doesn't look like anything else you've seen before. But in terms of demographics, it's almost identical to a typical public school in Arizona, which makes the accomplishments of these students all the more impressive.
We've led the state in student growth for 2 consecutive years. We also have been consistently in the top 10% in the state when it comes to scale scores. We've been #1 in our county every year for the last 4 years.
Carpe Diem has been recognized on a national level for its innovative approach and new ideas.
Educational leaders today are looking for several things. They're looking for economy, and they're looking for effectiveness. Carpe Diem offers both.
In addition to being more effective than traditional models of education, Carpe Diem is also more affordable, costing just over $5,300 per student per year.
So we can scale this and replicate this around the state and around the country. A good education that leverages whatever a student needs to succeed needs to be available for all students. As you can see, Carpe Diem is working, and now it's your turn to seize the day.
It's your turn.
Now it's your turn. Your turn to seize the day.
Seize the day!
Seize the day!
To learn more about Carpe Diem, visit us at carpediemschools.com and see how you can take part in this education breakthrough.
Now, we're very lucky to have 2 special guests here. That guy you saw on the big screen just now, Rick Ogston, is here from Carpe Diem Schools, the founder of Carpe Diem Schools. Rick, come on out. Thanks so much for coming, Rick. Appreciate it. And Gerard Robinson is here as well. Gerard is the former Commissioner of Education in Florida, former Commissioner of Education in Virginia. He's also involved in he was involved in the charter schools here and a particular charter school in Georgia. Gerard Robinson. Thanks for coming, Gerard. Good to see you. So as we begin our education discussion, and we'll take questions from the audience if you have any. I can't see too well right now, but in a minute we'll get to that. Rick, I wanted to ask you, obviously we all want education choices. We all want better education for our kids. We all know it's vitally important, but there's a cost involved. And you just had a graph there showed your school, Carpe Diem Schools, is half or a third of some schools that we see here in Georgia. How do you do that? How can that be possible? Excuse me, sit down. Sure.
By leveraging technology, you can actually change the entire ecosystem of a learning structure. And so technology really does things that help make it more efficient and actually even personalized for kids, way teachers cannot, at scale. And so when we begin to pull in the technology, we begin to release the teachers to actually do what only teachers can do, and that is really specialize and go in for strategic intervention and strategic instruction rather than shooting to the middle and trying to get everybody to a modicum of accomplishment. So using the computer for one set, releasing the teacher to do other things, actually change the entire ecosystem.
Wonderful. Gerard, now you were involved in the KIP Strive Academy charter school here in Georgia.
Correct.
And you were involved in forming that charter school as a parent, as a teacher, as an educator. How were you involved, and how did that charter school develop?
Well, first of all, let me thank the Georgia Public Policy Foundation for the invitation to be here. It's good to see friends I haven't seen in a while, all who played a role in helping shape my professional work. Real simple, we knew that there was a need in Atlanta for students to have a high-quality, focused education to prepare them for college. Real simple. There's currently schools in APS that provide that, but there are only so many schools to go around to do that, and so there was a need for it. We spent about 2 years, community meetings, testifying before boards, talking to funders, frankly talking to parents. Went to over 200 homes in Atlanta, sat down with parents, sat down with adult caregivers, because not all children are with their biological parents, and said, we want to prepare your student for college. We have rigor, and we have expectations that you, as an adult caregiver, will be involved in the process. And so through much work in the conversion with the KIP Foundation, we have a school that's up and running, and I'm proud to have been a part of it.
That's wonderful. Of course, in the news lately is this Chicago teacher strike, and it seems to be about the evaluation of teachers. It seems a bit ridiculous because in most areas of life, when you don't do your job, you get canned. Well, at least that's the life I've lived. Obviously, we need to discuss evaluation.
So how many times have you been canned?
Well, I got fired from the Chinese restaurant when I was a kid. I was a terrible dishwasher. It was awful. The China Village. So Rick, how do you do? True story. True story. How do you do teacher evaluation at Carpe Diem? Is it easier? Is it different? Is it better? How does it work?
It's really no different in some respects than any traditional school because we're still evaluating results. Results are what are important, but we have different metrics perhaps, and we have more metrics because we're not only evaluating the teacher's end result as in the student's achievement, but actually how they're teaching, and we can gauge that day to day because the student achievement can go up or down literally hour by hour, and we can gauge that based on a particular lesson the teacher taught, how they go back into the Learning Center and they begin to reapproach some of the digital curriculum with a higher level of knowledge and application, so the learning goes up. But we're still evaluating teachers. The teachers are aware of that, but we let it be very transparent, and the data is out there for everybody to understand. And then we provide the training for the teachers if they have a challenge or deficiency, so that they're not going to be penalized without due training.
Gerard, do you have some thoughts on evaluating teachers, on education, on charter schools, and on their flexibility for evaluating teachers?
So I've had a chance, as was mentioned in the introduction, to work in 2 states. So when I was in Virginia, we decided to put together a 2-year pilot where we work with a diverse set of stakeholders, union members, union association leaders, teachers, principals, academics, and others, and created a pay-for-performance program as a pilot so that when the next governor comes on place in Virginia, he or she would have an opportunity to look at that, to model legislation on how to move forward with pay-for-performance. But it's difficult to talk about pay-for-performance without having an evaluation metric. Let's take a look at Florida. We have eliminated tenure for incoming teachers through a legislative enactment over a year ago. Moving forward, every teacher who will come in will have a year-to-year contract. Tenure, as we know it, is over. We didn't see that as being anti-teacher, anti-profession. We saw it as being pro-student, pro-taxpayer. We simply want to make sure that in Florida, like many states, the #1 line item that a governor often has to sign off on is education. First or second could be health care, and there's a correlation between the two. And so were there a lot of gnashing of teeth? Absolutely. Some people saying it was simply unfair to require a teacher to be accountable for the test scores of students who are poor, who live in certain zip codes, who may come from single-parent homes. All the things we've heard for years, things we've heard about dealing with the Coleman Report in the 1960s. We have too many examples with a leader here and even some of our schools, particularly one of our KIPP schools here in the city, where you can have low-income students, students who are from homes with maybe only one caregiving adult, in some instances, none. We have too many examples of students living in cities across the country, particularly in Florida, where students have done well despite those factors. And so we said we're going to make sure that 50% of your evaluation is based upon student achievement, the additional 50% observation and other variables. We think that's reasonable. Of course, it's highly contested. We're currently in court over that issue, but it's a step in the right direction. Again, teachers also want to be evaluated, and teachers are saying, why am I receiving the same pay as a person down the hallway when I'm getting better results, putting in more hours? This is something teachers also want.
Sure, we want to reward success, and the best in the business, the best teachers should be rewarded, no question about it.
I think one of the challenges, though, is trying to figure out what that metric is. I think there have been a lot of unfair metrics in which teachers have been evaluated upon. For instance, proficiency as being the static scale score. You know, get 92% like we've done, or 100% in math like we've done many times, and then, okay, we're going to reward that. It's really not fair, because a lot of teachers are taking students who are 3, 4, 5 grade levels behind, and there's no way within 1 year they're going to get them to grade level or to proficiency. There's just no way. It takes years to be able to do that sometimes. Now, at least 1.5 to 2 years growth is really optimal when you're working with someone that's 3, 4 years behind, grade level behind. But right now, in our we just opened a school in Indianapolis, we have a 10th grader who is pre-K literacy. Pre-K literacy tested out. Now, how can I get him to proficiency and evaluate that teacher within 1 year? I can't. So what we use is primarily as a metric of growth. We're looking for a growth metric and say that the students need to be growing X number of % per year. And then we also then gauge overall results as well. So I think growth is a critical factor to begin to evaluate. And as on the board of directors for the Arizona Charter School Association and working with the Indianapolis and Indiana Charter School Association, moving towards more growth, I think, is where we need to be and much more fair.
Tell us a little bit about your transfer from you're in Arizona still. You didn't move. I know you're doing both states, but you moved from Arizona. Now you're opening up schools in Indiana. How did that come about? How were you received in the community? Kind of an outsider guy from Arizona bringing a new education model to the parents of that state. How did that go down? How's it working out so far?
Well, it started with Governors Weiss and Governor Bush, who just enjoyed Carpe Diem and loved to visit there. And they talked with Tony Bennett, who's Dr. Tony Bennett, the superintendent of education for Indiana. He came to Carpe Diem and part of the Chiefs for Change. And when he was leaving, he looked at me and just exiting our doors, and he looked at me with his coy smile. I can see him right now. And he said, "Rick, what would it take to get you to Indiana?" And I flippantly said, "Just give me a charter." And he said, "We can do that." And lo and behold, within a couple months, they'd established a new state board authorizer. And the state board authorizer called me, said the first job was to say, well, hey, ask me how I could get to Indiana. And I gave him a list of people I wanted to talk with, which include government people. I wanted to talk with district educators. I wanted to talk to community members and businessmen and philanthropists and all kinds of people in order to see if was it the right environment for us to be able to come. Because we're not just wanting to open one school. We're wanting to open a network of schools. And so that really, with all the changes they've made, the reform that they have made in Indiana, it is a phenomenal place to do business. Now, I got to say something here. I love Georgia. My kids were born here. If you remember when Gwinnett County Hospital opened up umpteen years ago now, my kids were born there, one of the first born there. And I lived here out in Gwinnett County, Beaufort area, Lawrenceville, Suwanee. It was great, loved it. And I was so excited to be invited to come back here and to be able to present and talk to you good folks. So excited that the plane was delayed, and we stayed on the tarmac for 20 minutes, and then my driver brought me here, and I left my coat in the car, and I hope I'll get it back. But if I don't, oh well. But, excited as I was to come here and present, if I came here as a charter holder to want to put up school here, I'd lose more than my jacket. I really wouldn't be as excited to come here as a charter holder because of the policies and some of the practices that surround charter school and authorization. Indiana has made a significant change in what they've done, so they've attracted it. A lot of my friends wouldn't want to come here because the environment just isn't where it needs to be. Now, I'm hopeful. You have an amendment coming up. I'm very hopeful that this will pass because it will be the starting point, I think, in which we can have many more deeper discussions about how we can bring networks of high-quality charter schools to Georgia, which I would love to be able to come here.
Well, I think a lot of folks would like to see you here as well, Rick. And that amendment you're talking about is to reestablish the Charter School Commission. You know, Larry Reed spoke earlier and he mentioned liberty, and liberty is a great thing, and this is liberty in action. We have a chance to take responsibility for education here in Georgia. We have a chance to make a difference, to vote on this amendment. And Gerard, you were on the Georgia Charter School Commission.
Correct.
And you helped establish charter schools.
So I can't see him right now, but Dr. Ben Scaffey is somewhere in the room. He was actually the chair of the Georgia Charter School Commission. It came about as a work of a number of state lawmakers here. It was real simple. We had a state legislative body, well, I should say a state body, who could approve schools. Great, you can approve schools, but was unable to use a lot of the local funding to make it happen. I can tell you as a charter school founder and former authorizer, without having the requisite funds in place, it's real tough to open and maintain a school for over 5 years. The Charter School Commission was created. We approved a number of schools. We also denied a number of schools. We were not a rubber stamp commission. We were about quality, and not as much as we were for quantity. And as life would have it, I ended up being one of the defendants in that case. It worked its way through the process. Ruling came out probably different than what some of us would like. But now it's before the people. And I can tell you with any work you do, particularly with amendments, you've got to make sure the language is correct. This isn't solely about charter schools, as this is the advancement of quality education in the public school sector. Magnet schools and charter schools are very similar. And yet when you talk about magnet schools, you don't have the same level of righteous indignation shared than when you hear with charters. And in many ways, the magnet schools are more, I would say, tougher or have different standards than charter schools, and often will take students not as academically capable as others. And so this is really simply a way of expanding quality options within the public school sector that we currently have in Georgia, and frankly as a way to increase likelihood that people will get great jobs, likelihood they will go to college, and likelihood that mayors, county persons, and others can attract and maintain businesses in Georgia. That's important.
The thing about the charter school I like the most is that you have the parents involved at the local level setting up the charter school. So they're going to be different. It's not a charter school doesn't mean we're going to have this charter school and there it is. It's for everybody. A charter school in Atlanta could be a lot different from a charter school in Cobb County or in Peachtree City or Cumming. It's the local people taking responsibility, doing what they think is best to educate their children in the community. And that's what we need. We need people involved.
So if I take a look at a state like in Virginia, we had 132 school divisions. In Florida, 72 if you add on the lab schools. Florida is really 3 different states. Tallahassee is in the northern part of the state, very different culture than the central part, and very different than the southern part of the state. Independent of charters, the traditional public schools in those areas are different because the communities, the nomenclature, and other is simply different. So one thing that keeps America great is our diversity. And at a time we're trying to show how great we are through diversity, let's not try to deter diversity by trying to say that charter schools have no place in the public sphere.
Now, Rick, you mentioned Indiana was a good environment for you. You moved in there. You have some schools up and running. How do you do the enrollment? How do you get the kids involved? Do the parents get a choice? How was the response when the schools got started and all that kind of thing up in Indiana?
It's been an interesting expansion out of state. I actually acquired an apartment there as well, and my wife of 34 years is principaling in Arizona, and I'm out here starting in school, and it's very challenging in that respect. However, we found that we were well received, whatever that word is, well received. And we started building our school on Meridian Street, right out, it kind of dissects Indianapolis right there. And we actually built the school in 49 days. Everyone said we wouldn't be able to do it. We did it. 49 days from land to a full operational school building. And kids started coming in as soon as we got those walls up and doors open. And they're still coming in and still enrolling and everything. What we found is that in our first parent meeting, parents were coming and literally tears were coming down some of the parents' eyes because they have desired a school like this that would treat their students individually rather than as a cohort. You see, and I'm not here to preach about charter schools or even about technology leverage learning. I'm interested in educating kids. It is all about students. And what we found is that when you begin to personalize learning for students, students begin to get engaged, respond, they begin to achieve at higher results because they have a certain responsibility and control over their own learning. And when they do that, I mean, I've got stories to tell you of kids that came into our school. One of them has ODD, oppositional defiance disorder, and mom said, just leave him alone. Don't touch him. Don't talk to him. He's got to warm up to everything, and he has temper tantrums, and he'll flare up. And I mean, I'm going, oh my God, what are we doing with this kid? So day one, he's in our quote fishbowl area, which is a common area, and we're doing the opening announcements, and I see him off by himself, and I'm going, oh my God, do I go near him or not? And so I did. I thought, I'm going to target that kid. We're going to find out what's going on. Within 1 week, I had a smile from him. Within 2 weeks, he started interacting with other kids. 4 weeks now, he is a peer mentor for other kids, and we've not seen one anger, outbreak at all. He's social. His mom came and said, "What did you do to this kid? What did you do with my son?" Well, all we did was put him in a positive culture, gave him control of his own education, gave him the tools to learn, let him learn at his pace, and he just began to blossom and open up. His mom, she said, oh man, he came home, he didn't used to take showers, and he's taking showers all the time. He didn't want to go to school. He's getting up now and saying, get me to school. He wanted to learn how to drive, never had that. He wanted the curfew extended. Mom said, why? Because he wants to go on a date. She is shocked. Okay, well, we've seen story after story. This is in Indianapolis where we just opened up of kids coming and parents crying literally because this is what they've always wanted for their child, to be treated individually. Now, I'll tell you this. When you begin to personalize learning for kids, it's messy, very messy. And students themselves find it difficult at first because we have kids going, oh, my head hurts, because they've never had to think before. Cohort learning in traditional schools, everyone carries a weight, and they all kind of share it and move and matriculate together. But when you individualize and personalize learning, each student carries his own water, if you would. And that's difficult for some because they're not used to having to do that. But once they get used to being responsible and carrying their own weight, they start to achieve, they start to grow, they start to mature, they start to open up, and it's just phenomenal.
No, it sounds great. I mean, personal responsibility is something we've kind of lost in our nation as a whole, it appears. So it sounds like that's the kind of thing you're encouraging. But I am curious about the funding, because you move the school in, and there's a local money, I'm sure, that go to the local school. They probably have state money going to their local schooling, and so in comes Rick Ogston with his Carpe Diem school, and I'm assuming some of the monies are going to go to your school.
Well, absolutely.
And some people weren't too happy about that. So how does the funding mechanism work?
What we got to realize, in my opinion, anyway, my viewpoint is that the funding belongs to the people, not to the system. And nobody has a right to that. Nobody. But those parents have a choice. And if you look at school choice, we've always had school choice in the United States. Always had school choice. If you got the money, you could choose where you're going to go. But it's been for the upper crust, if you would, the upper end. It's the middle class and the lower class, if you would, of economic society here that have not had the choice. And we've begun to open it up with great policy and everything. But when we move in there, even when states make good policy, it means everybody has choice, not just those who have money. Everybody has choice. And to me, those parents that are in the poorest part of our city, which we're located in right on the fringe of that, when they come in, and because they have chosen to come to our school, because the state has allowed us to receive the same funding that any other public school gets. And that's really the key. It's a funding that helps us to really provide choice to all parents. So we get state funding.
Right. No, it's fantastic. We certainly need more choice. But Gerard, our charter school setup here in Georgia is a little bit different. If the local school board it turns the charter down, and we pass this amendment in November, and then it goes to the state commission, my understanding is then, if they allow the charter, they're only going to get the state funding, not the local funding. And so I don't know if this is a recipe in the long haul that can survive, because they're not going to have the same funding as the local school.
So this is something that's not unique to Georgia, but as you look through the charter school movement nationwide, we receive on average 75 cents per dollar to the dollar here a kid would receive had they gone to a traditional school. So from the get-go, it's never been equal funding. Now, on one hand, someone has said, well, you guys argue that you could do more with less, and therefore we'll give you less, and you show us you can do more. That's one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is we have a public responsibility to educate children who constitutionally fall between ages that we believe are important before they become emancipated. So somewhere down the line, we've got to quit treating schools like 3/5 of school and give them the 100% of the funding they need to operate, and then we can talk about full accountability and about waivers and other things. I'd also like to hit on a point about demographics and money. In Florida, we had 2.6 million students, 180,000 students. Because of the state, a number of people want to remove there. A number of people who are moving there, children like Rick's, may have been raised in a different state, but now they're moving here to retire. Florida is the only state in the nation with a department dedicated to elder affairs, just because there's such a large percentage of the population over the age of 55. Pay taxes, have no children in the school system, and so they have lobbyists. Now remember, children are the only group in the United States, or since we're in Georgia, with no paid lobbyists. Now, I'm not saying their teachers don't lobby for them, I'm not saying their parents don't lobby for them, but they don't have a paid lobbyist to do this work. And so as we look 20 years down the line, and I look at demographics, I'm clear about two things. The states, and Georgia would fall into this, that have the kind of economy to attract families to want to live and work here, and we're unique in the fact that we're one of the few states when you mention the state name, the first city that comes to mind is the state capital. You say California, you think Los Angeles, not Sacramento. Texas, you think Dallas or Houston, depending on your football interests. You don't think Austin. But it's Atlanta, and so you have something unique. But I can tell you, we're going to have a tough time filling the seats for teachers who teach STEM subjects: science, math, engineering, and technology. They can make, A, more money in the private sector, but number two, it's not enough to go around. So here's why I proposed the idea of why digital learning is important. If I had a great physics professor or teacher in Tallahassee, and there's 71 other divisions, I can't multiply this person at many times. But what if I use technology for this one physics teacher to teach maybe AP physics to all the students throughout the state? It's simply one way of taking one person and administering his or her expertise across the nation. Now, of course, someone said, it's no way that you can have one person sit there and people look at a TV screen or a cathode ray tube and learn anything. I said, well, if that's the case, then Jack LaLanne failed. Someone who fundamentally changed health and what we thought about it in fitness through technology. I'm saying that we're going to have a dearth of the number of people willing to go into teaching STEM, but we're still going to need more STEM graduates. Technology is frankly one way of making that happen.
Gerard, I was shocked when I read an article recently, I think just this week, about a high school right here in DeKalb County or whatever, that for 2 months a group of students didn't have math because they didn't have any math teachers. They couldn't hire enough of them. Now, I'm sure there's a whole other side to that story, whatever that is, but there is no justification for that. When you leverage digital learning, you can do exactly that. And right now, telepresence, are you familiar with telepresence? I mean, the cost of telepresence is minimal nowadays. And in our classrooms, we have the ability to do interactive teaching so that when a teacher is out there in Florida and we're in Arizona, they can come in, see the whiteboard, write on the whiteboard that our kids are writing on. The kids can see them, they can see the kids. It's interactive. It's no longer just a one-sided conversation anymore. Technology well leveraged, creates an outstanding environment for kids to get some of the best teaching the nation's teachers have to offer. And it spreads out the load. It is an excellent thing. So we are able to do that within our own classrooms, to bring in people from all over that has that interactivity, and at a cost that still is way less than hiring a teacher themselves.
Sure. And that's what you've been doing at Carpe Diem. Obviously, we see the results. We see the blended learning model.
Right.
I think is what you call it, which is the in-person and the over the internet type education at the same time. And it's wonderful. It is indeed looks like, based on what you two, Fanjanam, are saying, the future of education. I mean, it sounds like we don't have an option. We have to move forward in this, or we're going to continue to be at the bottom of the education ladder in Georgia. And frankly, there's no reason. We can do better here in Georgia. We must do better here in Georgia. There is no reason we should be 48th or 49th in education. It's a shame.
And what's interesting is that when you look at digital learning, it may be one of the few public policy issues where the adults are 10 years behind the children and students. I mean, if you think about it.
Yeah.
So in Virginia, Governor Bob McDonnell had a bold initiative to do more with digital learning. We were able to introduce and sign into law a new digital bill. I helped put together an education summit. We had an entire panel dedicated to digital learning. What was interesting is when you talk to the adults about digital learning, because we didn't grow up in that environment, it's just tough to comprehend that people can truly learn that way. And yet we can go to a student or to our children or some who have grandchildren and have them manipulate technology in ways that simply we cannot. And so part of the policy gap that we have to fill is an expectation gap. You now have a third of the nation's children in high schools who at least have one class online. In fact, in Florida, we now require every entering ninth grader to at least take one online course before he or she can graduate. And when they go to one of our 28 Florida college systems or the 11 state university systems, a number of students are taking it. So to say it's a future that we're trying to catch up to, but that's an adult issue, not a student issue.
I think we've got to be careful when we enter digital learning. I've had the opportunity, the privilege, the honor of going to a number of places and speaking and sharing about digital learning because of our success. The challenge that I see, people always ask, well, if you buy the technology, and they begin to assume that if you buy the technology, you put it in the classroom, that it's automatically going to produce results. It won't. We've had a wonderful district in Arizona that spent millions of dollars in putting technology, and the classrooms are rich with it, and the teachers are well trained, but the achievement scores have not gone up at all. And people begin to condemn them. And I had to counter that and go, wait, what was their goal? If they wanted to enrich the education of kids, that's great. They have achieved that because their students are having great experience in doing all kinds of things that technology allows. Their goal wasn't to improve achievement, maybe. Now, I think that's foolish because I think you can do both. Because you've got to have not only a lot of technology, you have to have digigogy, if you would. There's a pedagogy and then there's a digigogy. And you got to have a good digigogical pedagogy. Yeah? Say that twice. Because it's not just about that, putting that in there and giving the kids. It's about the kind of technology you use. It's about the kind of curriculum you select. It's about the kind of assessments that you do. And when you begin to launch into digital learning, please, 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 just don't go out and buy a bunch of stuff. Or if you have a rich person in Georgia, and I know you've got a number of people who would love to just give to your schools, and well, they should, but there should be a very thoughtful plan, because they go out and go, oh, I like iPods, so they buy everybody iPods or iPads or whatever. The problem is, not all curriculum goes on those things. Right. It doesn't have Flash, it doesn't have this, and you begin, if you don't have a plan, you're going to end up shooting yourself in the foot and giving digital learning a black eye. So you've got to think it out, think it through, and I think if you're going to launch into that in this state, please get a plan.
So it sounds like you're saying you can't just throw money at a problem
and
it goes away.
No, because like charter schools. Now, Arizona, admittedly, we were known as the Wild West of charter schools. I mean, when we open it up, we've got over 500 of them now, and people are going, oh, wow, they just went all over the place. And we had high performers and low performers, and yes, we did. and we're cleaning that up, and I'm a part of that cleanup, and it's a wonderful thing to do. But you know what? Whenever you start something, you're going to have abuses, you're going to have good, you're going to have bad, you're going to have high, you're going to have low. But don't let the risk or the messiness stop you from starting the journey.
Yeah, and 8% are graduating at $21,000 per student. So clearly, education, it turns out, is not easy. Sure. It takes effort and energy, and there are no silver bullets, but we're trying to kick around some ideas here of how to improve education. And I think, Gerard, you probably, your experience has shown you that money is not simply the answer. You just can't throw money at the problem and it's going to work out.
Sure. So we know that money matters. Very few of us would say that it doesn't matter. The question is, how does it matter most? And when we have conversations about funding that's one-sided, it's to talk about revenue, not about expenditures. I don't have enough money to pay for textbooks. The question is, how much money have you spent on textbooks, and how many of those textbooks became obsolete within 2 years? Well, if you actually move some of the textbooks into a digital format, or maybe even a PDF, worst case scenario, you can actually save funds. So when I talk school funding, expenditures and revenue, not simply revenue. Now, Governor Rick Scott in Florida just invested $1 billion in additional money to K-12 education, something no other chief executive has done, because he believes it's important from the K-12 side to make sure the money is in place where it makes sense. It means surely we had to take it from another pot of money, but he was investing in the future and making some short-term decisions. In Virginia, Governor McDonald decided 2 years ago to invest $100 million in new funds into Virginia's higher education system, considered one of the best in the nation. We didn't simply give our universities $100 million. We said, here's $100 million, but we were going to ask for cost savings, a strategic plan. Here are incentives, for example, to maybe finish school in 3 years instead of 4, since, for example, the average student now will take 6 years to graduate. Or if they're going to take 6 years to graduate, why not leave in the 5th year maybe with a master's in education or a master's in business? So we were asking for more innovative ways to show how money matters. Again, no one will say that it will not, but it matters. Another point I wanted to follow up on when Rick had mentioned the part of if schools aren't doing well, we're going to say, see, they have all this technology and the students aren't learning. My best response is, how many people have gained weight buying a running machine? We hang clothes on it. It's become part of our family decorum. We have plants hanging on it. And yet no one will say, we gained weight because we didn't use a machine, or more importantly, we won't say, well, it's just interesting how we choose what to focus on.
Let's, we only have about 20 more minutes. I want to take some questions from the audience.
Dave, we do have questions. Our first question is in the middle of the room.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you all for this great discussion. It's Tony Roberts. My first question is to Gerard. When are you coming back to Georgia to help us where you belong?
First of all, it's good to hear Tony. I can't see you that well.
It's
Tony,
better. It's better.
If you know Tony, in fact, my wife's met him as well. I said, he's a really funny, serious guy. It's very rare to meet people like that. I've got my 4-year-old over here who was actually born here in Atlanta. I've got 2 daughters who were raised here in the city, and some people haven't seen her since she was born, so she's much taller than that now. I'm back in Richmond right now with the family, enjoying some time off, and I will be as much support as I can from Richmond.
Well, you're always welcome back here. And Rick, so great to meet you. I've heard so much about you and the schools, and certainly resonated. You don't know me, I work for the Charter Schools Association here, and the only reason I'm getting asked this question is I'm a sponsor. So if you ever want a lot of questions, you're a sponsor. But you've made a lot of important points today, and I know you and I have knowledge, and you've got so many things that you could say, but I thought I would ask you this. You were talking about they opened the door for you in Indiana by passing the new law and the alternate authorizer. I still have people in our state especially that say, well, the only reason that charter schools are not approved by local school districts is they must not have been good. Have you had any experience of trying to open charter schools that were being authorized, or you were trying to get a local school district authorize you? And if you've never had that, I mean, why not?
I personally would never go to a state in which I had to subject myself to district authorization. It is not a pretty picture. Districts have I guess, unfortunately, a conflict of interest in that, because they may want to authorize you because the state says or community says they want it, but they really don't want you there. I would rather go unbiased to where the accountability and the funding is all directly from the state. It's collected by the state. It's distributed by the state fairly and equitably across the state to charter schools, to district schools. I'm really not about district versus charter. I'm about, again, kids and what's best for kids. And I think choice is best for kids, period. Now, what does that look like? Now, in Indiana, they've got choice that involves public district schools, public charter schools. They now have a great voucher program going on there, and there's lots of challenges with people have that. And people, I just think that we need to, again, put the power and empower parents to make good decisions and to give them the tools and the funding to do so. And when you do that, I think that the marketplace itself will correct itself. There'll be some abuses, there'll be some challenges, but for me and my network of schools, we want to be able to come in, build a school, build a network. It's not just about one school, it's about 5, 6, 10, 12 schools, which is what we were ordered 6 charters at one time in Indiana. We'll build those out. We don't want to have to be subject to the political winds of change. That's why I wanted them right up front, where I can just go ahead and do it as long as we're performing. We get that privilege of doing it. And then districts or any kind of other political party coming into power can't say, oh, no, you can't. When we have that ability and we're empowered to do that, then parents can come in, make good choices. If we're not performing, there'll be others out there that they can go choose, and they should be able to do so. So for me, again, it's about a state authorizer, not a district authorizer, an unbiased state with high accountability and high standards. And there's a lot out there. The state of Indiana, when they formed the board, they were very thoughtful about making sure that they had extremely high standards. And wow, what they put me through. Going, man, goodness gracious, but you know what, I'm glad. I've got their support, and we're there, we're prospering, things are good, and I'm looking forward to a great history there with Indiana and would love to come to Georgia.
And we know where I stand on state authorizer. I was a member of our commission here, so I support it. Where I would differ is I believe there is a role for local district authorizing. I mean, local district school boards and superintendents are elected or appointed. We had some who were appointed in Florida to represent the district, and so there is a role for them to play. But I take a look at Milwaukee as a model of looking at competition amongst authorizers. When I worked in Milwaukee, we had 4 authorizers: the school board, the city council, a community college, and the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. Now, it was very interesting how it worked, because you now allowed a parent or a charter school forming group to almost have a menu. If I go to the school district, guess what? They'll give me a building. No other authorized will give me that. That's an incentive. If I go to the University of Milwaukee, University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, I have access to professors. I become part of a broader laboratory conversation, a college prep model that I can't get with the city. But if I go with the city, they actually had an evaluator where every single year there were pre and post tests. They did value added across the way for teachers, for students, in ways you wouldn't find at the others. Unfortunately, the community college decided not to authorize any. But it really allowed the authorizers, not the authorizers, but the petitioners become much more savvy on who would provide what. So while I support the state, I'm not saying the state versus local. There's a role for the local in a democratic process. It should be there. But I think we should be very smart on how we diversify authorizing. And I think we did the right thing when we had the Georgia Charter School Commission. And I also want to thank representatives or lawmakers, I'm not sure they're in the room, Kathy Ash and Alicia Morgan, who took the political courage to make this happen when people said it wouldn't. So I just want to make sure that that's put out there, because this couldn't happen without legislative support.
Dave, we have a question in the back of the room on the far right side for you. Right back here.
Josh Jordan from Student Studio from Athens. I have a question, something I haven't really heard yet, and I think that charter schools are great. I think they're very valuable, and we've talked about technology a lot, but I haven't heard you talk about specialization, which I feel with Carpe Diem is kind of one of your niches. So, you talked, Mr. Robinson, about how you can't necessarily just throw money at the problem, make it go away. And I think that technology is part of that, but I think the specialization of charter schools, when it's done right, is truly effective. And I was just curious about the whole panel, what you guys think about specialization specifically aligned with technology.
So in a previous life, I was a president of the Black Alliance for Educational Options. We were a recipient of a $4 million grant from the Gates Foundation to open up a host of charter schools throughout the country, particularly community-based practitioners. We opened up a school in Philadelphia called Boys Latin of Philadelphia Charter School. It's one of the few charter schools, really one of the few public schools in the region to require Latin. It's one of the few schools to require a truly college prep focus to prepare you to move on to college. That was a specialty school where people believed it was important. Specialty because it was all boy. The community said we're having a whole lot of challenges with our boys. We having challenges with our girls, but really with our black boys, a particular challenge. Having an all-male environment was a specialty we thought was important. But focusing on Latin, we know the importance that has not only studying the Romance languages, but its work related to scores and other pieces. Waiting lists, great school, great scores. At the same time, we work with a school in St. Paul, a school focused on students who had dropped out, and a third of the students were homeless. A school focused on specializing, getting these kids into what? The music industry. Because many of them had talents that were better able to find themselves articulated through music, through poetry, and others. People figured they may not graduate a lot. 92% of their students have gone on to college with a third of the population being homeless. So I've worked in the specialty area. I think that's important. We even approved some specialty charters here. But APS currently has specialty schools, all boy, all girl, a focus also on Mandarin. So again, this is something that we can do in the public sector, traditional charter and public charter school. One of the advantages of the charter school is the ability to be able to hire the teachers and the personnel that you need.
Specialty schools are extremely important to me. And I think that you can have a specialty school, I think, run even more efficiently using and leveraging technology. One of the things that we do in our schools, our goal is to, and we won't meet this goal in Indiana this year because we're taking a lot of students behind grade level, but by 10th grade, students should be able to complete all their high school credits. By 10th grade. There is no reason that shouldn't happen. Then in grades 11 and 12, they should be working on college credits and also doing internships in the vocational fields of their choice. So we've linked up right now with like Indiana University Health System. When our kids get into 10th grade and they begin to, when they enroll in our school, first of all, they have to create their own name tag. And it goes in their cubicle. You saw those cubicles? People say, oh, it looks like a call center. So what? Yeah, it does. But I'll tell you, the kids personalize their space. They have all kinds of stuff in there, but put their name in there. And then they have to put and affix a symbol of their future. What do they want to be when they grow up? They want to be a veterinarian, a cosmetologist, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. They have to put that in, so they're having to think. Now, it may change 50 times before they graduate. Who cares? But they have to think, and so when we're having data conversations with them, we're beginning to specialize, if you would, and focus our responses to them based upon what they want to do when they grow up. A cosmetologist or whatever, you know, when we had studying math, and we had just this last week, we had a cosmetologist person who said, oh man, what does this math have to do with me? I just want to put on makeup. You know? And so we actually began a course in which the student had to research what is the relevance of math in whatever area they were going to focus in. Mm-hmm. And you know, I went at this girl and I said, well, do you ever use a mirror? And she said, well, of course, you got to use mirrors. I said, well, you ever heard of the quadratic equations? No. You will. I said, you know, let's go over here and look at this. And when we begin to look at quadratic equations and the importance of those in creating convex and concave mirrors, she began to go, really? I said, now you may never use math in putting on makeup, but those who provide you the makeup and the tools and everything, we used a lot of math. And she began to, really? We had that conversation. So our desire is to take kids when they're in the 10th, 11th and 12th grade particularly, but 10th possibly, and connect them with community business partners and get them to go into those Indiana University Health and go into veterinarians and everything. We do this in Arizona already. And then the students can say, you know what, that's exactly what I want to do. Rather than waiting until they were in 12th grade and having no clue And then even when they get into 12th grade, graduating, going into the vocation or going to college and realize, I don't want this. How many of you started somewhere and go, I wish I'd never done that? Well, we're given the opportunity. So we're helping specialize, if you would, in a different way. But I want to create STEM schools. I want to create a drama and art school. I want to create all that leveraging technology, because time becomes a variable, and you can do a whole lot more in the time you've got when you leverage technology.
Dave, we have time for 2 more questions. The first one will come from your left side of the room, and the next question will come from your right side of the room. So our first question is to your left.
Good afternoon. My name is Paige Olson. I'm a parent of 3 children that have gone through the public school system. I just want to make a point and then ask a question. I only have experience with conversion charter schools. And when you start with the charter, you have a very innovative plan that your community is pretty much buying into. And then when you put it before your local board of education, it looks so different from what the other schools look like that you have to start watering it down so that it will be palatable. And then you finally get your approval, and then you go back for your recharter, and then it gets watered down more and more, so that before you know it, 5, 6 years out, your charter school, except for maybe your parent volunteer hours, looks exactly like the other middle schools or elementary schools or high schools that you tried to differentiate yourself from. So my full support goes for a state authority to help with that effort. My question is in the physicality of our schools. We spend a lot of SPLOST money building our schoolhouses, and I've participated in quite a few of them, but they still look like traditional schools. The computer labs are very separate from the real classrooms, and I'm very interested in the visuals from your school where it kind of does look like a call center. What are we going to do as a state to start making our schoolhouses look like the future and not something that looks very comfortable for the teachers that we kind of have right now and the administration that we've got right now? Don't we kind of have to have the bricks and mortar to reflect the future of how our kids need to be educated?
Gerard?
There's a gentleman who is currently a trustee member at University of Pittsburgh. I'll see if his name comes to me. We had him speak at our statewide philanthropic network 4 months ago. And he started a school. It's a traditional public school in the worst part of Pennsylvania, in the worst part of Pittsburgh, a neighborhood he grew up in. All the statistics you would probably figure would be endemic to that were there. He worked with an artist to almost create a feng shui type school, not using that model, but one that was much more economically conducive to students' learning, how chairs were set up, the way doors were put in. It was a very unique model, and he says after X number of years, he's had no violence in the school, yet he's surrounded by a sea of violence. He ended up winning a MacArthur Genius Award as a result of his work. If I can give his name to Kelly if it comes to me. It's a way of using architecture to link to education, something that people have wanted to do. I won't say that any of the charter schools we've created were architecturally different than the others. So I couldn't add on to my own personal experience. Some of the schools that we've authorized weren't radically different, but it's a step in the right direction. That's just one model that I've heard of.
Yeah, architecture is very important in learning, but I think we've got to get beyond thinking that 4 walls make a school. The object is, again, for me, is to get our kids outside into the community, to get them outside of the 4 walls, to begin to let the education, again, empower the community to become part of the educational system. Thus, you form those partnerships and those relationships with business and with philanthropy and with government legislators and things like that, where the kids are interacting with these people. So the education of the future is really about more transparent walls, if you would, permeable, in which kids go out and they come in, rather than containment centers to keep them in. We've got to think about permeation. We've got to think about transcending the normal model of the school day to where this is when it takes place and this is how. You've got to rethink who is the delivery system for education. In the traditional models for eons, it's been the teacher is the the person who has all the knowledge and is there to spoon feed or pass it out or lay it out for kids. Now, that's changed it all, because no longer is there a hierarchy of learning. Kids can go out there and learn all the time through the internet, and they do. I'm afraid about some things they are learning, but some of the skills that we've got to teach them have got to change, and that's why when we talk about 21st century, I could go on and on. 21st century skills, everyone says we want our kids 21st century qualified. What does that mean? And so people begin to say, well, we want them to be able to have the 4 C's for the 21st century. That's communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. Which one of those wasn't necessary in the 21st century? Which one of those weren't necessary, in the 19th century? And we go back and forth. They've all been necessary. It's not that that the skills have changed, if you would, or that we need. It's that how they get there. It's the verbs are the same. The nouns change. The Bloom's taxonomy, if you're familiar with that, and it goes out from basically understanding to a higher level of evaluation and synthesis and creativity. All right, great. You get all this taxonomy all the way up. Well, you've always need that. That was 1956, 7, something like that created. And it's being used today, appropriately so. But how you get there, how you create, now you're going to use technology to do some of that creation and that synthesis. Now the kids need to know how to organize high volumes of information. I mean, goodness, how many emails do you get? And how many of you have been tempted, or maybe you have declared email bankruptcy? You just delete it all and you start over the next day. I mean, I want to do that all the time. It's just, oh, wow. But we've got to teach the kids how to organize the information and how to evaluate it. So the education needs to go beyond, again, the classroom and the computer lab, and get into the internet, the web, the community, and everywhere. So, and your architecture is going to have to change in order to represent that. Long answer.
Dave, our next question is from your right side of the room, and then our final question will, in fact, be from the front, one of the front tables.
My name is Daniel Silver. I'm a student, a civil engineering technology student at Southern Polytechnic State University, here on behalf of our campus newspaper. My question to you is, with the influx of all the innovation of technology, do you think there's a point that maybe you should let the students have breathing restrictions that would be in place to let them learn to use them, and even the teachers?
Well, I'll let Rick go first.
I'm not certain I understand the question.
For example, I went to Forsyth County up northeast of here. There was so much technology brought into the high schools that the teachers had a point where they didn't know what they were doing, and so much technology also we couldn't bear it. We could do it, but it was someone learning before you could do it.
Okay, yeah, I think we're getting into teacher preparation programs right now, which is another reason why I liked Indiana, because I was looking at various universities, Marian University and Indiana University, wanting to help me. John Hopkins invited me there last month to help them to rethink some of their teacher preparation, because they've got to be able to begin to learn to incorporate a digigogy, if you would, back to that word again, in blended learning. They need to be able to learn how do you teach in the 21st century leveraging technology. Now, for those teachers today in the classroom, you bring it in, and if you get your ego out of the way, the kids will teach you how to use it. They will.
Right.
I have a K-12 system in Arizona. I have kindergartners using the technology in our classrooms, and we have a substitute teacher. The kinders teach the substitute how to do it. A kindergartner.
Right.
It can be done. It's not difficult, but you just got to get the ego out of the way and become a learner with the kids, and it can happen. And then teacher preparation programs at the university level, sir, must change.
Here's a perfect opportunity for public-private partnership to come in and provide a much-needed answer to a big problem you identified. So in Virginia, I was able to give Governor Bob McDonnell a win by partnering with Microsoft. And we created a program where all of our high schools in Virginia would have an opportunity for students to take Microsoft coursework free of charge, that we would train up to 10 teachers free of charge to learn how to teach the Microsoft package, so that a student leaving high school may decide to go directly into the workforce, military, decide to stay home, or go into college, would actually leave with the skill set that's important. North Carolina was the first state to implement this, had some major wins, and a number of people were certified. In Florida, was able to give Governor McDowell a win by being the first state in the nation to have Microsoft training high school and guess what, middle school. Now, we may think it's tough for a middle school student to learn it, but in fact, it's not. All the middle schools in Puerto Rico have gone that route. The part about teacher training is important. We had a summer academy or summer training where we prepare teachers on the how-tos, the whys. But what teachers appreciate is the fact that it didn't cost them any traditional money out of his or her own pocket to make this happen. They were able to hone in on skills they wanted or to build on skills they already had. But why this was a great public-private partnership, we as a state used Race to the Top money in Florida. In Virginia, we used a innovation fund that we had with some public and private support. But it was one way of public-private sector coming in saying, we're going to work with educators to train a generation of soon-to-be what I call edupreneurs, people who are in education who are going to become entrepreneurs in ways we haven't thought of. That's simply one way we've done it to help teachers meet that need.
I've got to say this regarding that as well, that I think in our quest for accountability, which is extremely important, I wholly agree with that. I think it should be equitable across the board from district and charter and whatever. Unfortunately, I think it's more for charters than it is for district schools. But nonetheless, we have, with all of our quest for accountability, we have scared teachers. It is very hard for a teacher to want to go out and take a risk on something new when they know they're going to be, the screws are going to be put to them if the kids fail. And they're already overloaded with so many things, and what we do is we begin to layer on new programs, and here comes blended learning, another program to layer on, and they don't even have the other stuff working well. I think we've done too much and overloaded teachers in all schools way too much and made them too afraid to take risks when it comes to leveraging technology and everything because, again, of the accountability. We need to back up and rethink innovation zones and ways in which we can free up policies and practices and create a reasonable level of accountability and encourage and train teachers and not just continually layering on things that overwhelm them and say, make more bricks and give them less straw. Anyway, Mike.
Well, we're out. Unfortunately, we're out of time, and I don't even have any kids. I have dogs. So all I have to do is watch Caesar Milan, how to teach my dog. So it's real easy for me. A round of applause for our two special guests, Rick Ogston and Gerard Robinson. Great job, guys.